everyone, SirKex here, and today we'll be showing you how I created my profile picture. It's a simple method that I think can be done with minimal skill and produce okay results. The basic workflow is first collecting reference models from the internet, then importing them into Blender to combine and remix, then finally tracing over the results in InkScape. For the models used, first we have the TABAXI KHAJIIT Lord by Polygram. Second, the Furry Kobold base by Rowboat. Third, the Victorian Abigail Hat by Tijuan Art Studio. And finally, the Archduke Albert scan made by Jeffrey Marshall. Links for all of the models used can be found in the description. Now comes the part of the video where I get to show off how totally amazeballs I am at Blender, and I've definitely opened the program more than twice. To start with, I pulled in the Kobold model and started just deleting all of the geometry that I just don't need. The only part of it I'm actually going to use is the head. And if you just look here, this is the super expert method of doing this, and is definitely not super inefficient and terrible. So I'm just going to go ahead and let you watch in silence as I remove all of this unnecessary geometry for me. And yeah, I think that's probably enough of that. We'll go ahead and skip past the rest of this. Once I got the head separated from the rest of the body, I imported the hat and began to position that where I wanted it. I did end up mirroring it because I decided I wanted the feathers on the left-hand side. Yeah, there it goes. The way mirror works in Blender is not at all intuitive to me. After I got the hat set up, I ended up importing the Archduke statue and removing everything except for the neck roof. It's the only part of the geometry I was actually interested in. If you are noticing that the geometry on this model seems to be a lot more complex than everything else, it's, I believe, because this came from a 3D scan of a real antique bust. Finally, I imported the TABAXI model and removed just the head from it. I did attempt to repose the model because I would have liked to have had a more neutral stance for the character, but I ended up running into my inexperience in using Blender and just 3D modeling in general. So couldn't get that to look nice, and eventually just gave up on it and decided that I was just going to make the alterations that I wanted in the final drawing in InkScape. The last thing in Blender I did was set up a camera to take a screenshot from. It isn't strictly necessary, but I wanted to have a repeatable, returnable camera position that I could return to in case I decided to come back and make any alterations to the model. I could take another screenshot from the same position and line the two up easier in the future. I ended up not needing to do that, but I am glad that I went through the little bit of extra effort to have that option available to me in case I decided I needed it. Now that we've got a screenshot of our reference model, we can move into Inkscape. To start with, I would like to say that everything I know about Inkscape, I learned from watching this Inkscape tutorials by TJ Free, who I do recommend checking out if you are interested in learning the basics of how to use Inkscape. Link for the playlist is in the description. So we start by loading in our screenshot to the background of our canvas so that we can trace over everything. To start out with, I'm just going to be tracing using black so that I can get the silhouette that I want. And then later on, I will go ahead and come in and add color to everything. So for the rest of this, we'll probably just be watching the time lapse of my work in Inkscape. It's not particularly complicated. Like I said, it's mostly tracing. I'm going to be making a few adjustments as I go to make a couple of changes that I was unable to do in Blender. I'm going to be trying to make the face a little bit less feminine, a little bit more masculine, and as I said before, I'm going to be attempting to change the pose. So I will go ahead and allow that time lapse to go on. I would like to just go ahead and explain why I decided to go with a kobold for my profile image. The main reason being that the name Sir Kex does come from a D&D character that I used to play who was a kobold bard. So when I made the decision to name my channel after him, I decided I should probably make my profile to match. And there I am, just adjusting the shape of the horns. But as you can see, I did end up making the jawline a little bit more squared, and the spikes a little bit pointier. The, I guess, ear frills, we'll call them. But I wanted to adjust the curve of the horns so they'd be a little bit more visible there. There we go. I'm attempting to use the existing pose in the background to sort of reference the altered, more arms at rest positioning. And now I'm attempting to, get the details for the ruff in there. It's a little bit difficult to trace just because of how, I guess, muddy is the best descriptor for the ruff that I do have there. Mostly just as a result of that image coming from a 3D scan as opposed to an actual model with, good clean geometry that can be copied. So I copied that one sort of tear-shaped element, and now I'm adjusting the rest of them to sort of fit with the perspective. Kind of roughly matching them to the shape that's on the ruff there, and adjusting them as I see fit. In other news, I've heard a common strategy to drive engagement is to include intentional mistakes, since people will smugly correct you in the comments. So I've decided to include a wrong fact in all of my videos for people to correct me on. This video's wrong fact is that humans cannot feel if something is wet or not. We don't have the nerve endings in our fingertips for it. We are only capable of detecting temperature and how slippery something is, which our brains then use to infer whether or not the object we're touching is in fact wet. Now that I've got my silhouette mostly finished, I've begun going in and adding colors to everything. Again, this character is a bard, which is why I'm going for kind of brighter, bolder coloring for him. Yep, and there we are, making adjustments to the front part of the suit jacket. Yeah, perspective's a little bit weird on that, seeing the far edge of it. I don't know if you can see that sort of grayish white outline around everything, but that's kind of the extent of my canvas. Everything beyond that isn't going to be a part of the final image. And the canvas size is, I believe, 1080 by 1080. Yeah, there we are, just going through a bunch of different colors for the shirt there while I decide what I want to go with. I end up on a kind of off-white cream color, I believe. There I am adding a little bit of shading there to add shadow to the hat and also just to add a little bit more definition to the shape of the face. Just adding in the coloring for the lower jaw. Give him a bit more of an aggressive underbite, making things a little bit more angular and pointy. And I'm going to go ahead and put a gradient on the horns, so they're not just a solid color, going from kind of a darkish brown to black. It did take me a couple of tries to figure out how I wanted the eyes to look. Yeah, I ended up going with just a fairly simple design on that. Just a single gradient for the iris. Excuse me, for the sclera. And then a pointed iris. Feathers ended up being a bit of an interesting challenge because the actual 3D model just had them as flat planes. So I ended up creating kind of a rough feather shape and then applying a gradient across the whole thing. And then adding, I think, a black stroke through it. Or a colored stroke through it. As well as a little bit of a blur on the edges there, so they look less defined. I'm not thrilled with how they ended up coming out, but they look okay considering my skill level and the process I used to make them. So I did end up importing an old vector that I created back in university, originally as something of a logo for a class project, which I decided to use instead of the, I believe, Kingdom Hearts reference that was being used as the feather pin on the original model. I did end up mostly remaking the diamond from the logo, just because I actually don't have the original vector files for it, so I had to recreate it. Just a fairly simple little kind of design element that's a callback to my earlier works. I did decide to try and do the chain here, which ended up being kind of a bit of a wasted effort, since I don't think you can see it in the final image. It got cropped out. But that's fine. It's there. I still have the files, so I can use it if I ever need a less cropped version of everything. And I'm just doing quick tracing of this big, kind of chunky, meaty chain here. It ends up looking a little bit odd, just because the perspective here is kind of unusual. But I think it looks okay. They do look a little flat. But I think the whole thing looks flat, because there's just no shading whatsoever over the entire image. There we go. The basic figure done. So for the background, I originally just thought green circle, but I think I ended up landing on just a solid color, just a solid light color for it. Yeah, I tried a couple of things before I landed on that, but I wanted something that wasn't just black or white, and I also wanted something that wasn't too distracting. So that's the, I think, full final process of everything. You can see the final image on screen now. Like I said, fairly straightforward process. Doesn't require a huge amount of skill as soon as you know what it is that you actually want to make. And I would like to say, you know, if you liked the video, go ahead and leave a like or a comment, or I guess you can subscribe. There's not a whole lot on this channel to subscribe for, but the subscribe button is there if you want to do it. But in the meantime, we all have our own hobby journeys, and I'd like to thank you for joining me on mine.